Alright guys, today I'll be reviewing Great Bear at Hershey Park. This is the B&M invert here, and it's a pretty fun ride. I'd say it's a mid-tier B&M invert, maybe lower tier, and I'll explain why in this review. So for starters, this thing gets a decent line throughout the day. Usually it hovers around an hour on weekends, so I wouldn't prioritize this thing right away personally. In fact, if you follow my strategy, which is start with Comet Super Duper Looper, I would actually skip this thing and go right to Storm Runner after that because this thing's going to have a pretty consistent weight, and it's just one of those rides where you have to suck up the weight if you want to have the best day at Hershey, I feel like. You can, of course, get here before Storm Runner, but then you're risking waiting in an even longer line for Storm Runner, which I personally wouldn't do. But you could, of course, also just buy Fast Lane, which, I mean, lets you skip everything, so you could, of course, do that if you're feeling like splurging the money for it. But now let's talk about appearance and theming. The appearance of this thing is probably the best of any B&M invert I've done. Maybe Alpengeist is better, but I don't know. This thing is amazing. It's flying throughout the entire hollow. You've got the creek running beneath it. You're flying over pathways, the water. You're just going every which way. It brings a lot of kinetic energy to the pathways. It's amazing. And now for the theming. This ride really doesn't have any theming. Most of Hershey Park's coasters don't have any theming, except for Laugh Track, which the ride sucks, so kind of needs theming. But this ride isn't about the theming. It's kind of themed to the Great Bear constellation, but you see that with the entrance sign, and that's about it. This ride is definitely about the ride experience more than the theming. So speaking of that ride experience, you're going to board these trains, and these trains are amazing. For over-the-shoulder restraints, this is about as good as you're getting these old-school B&M over-the-shoulder restraints. I'm so glad these don't have the vests, because if you know me, you know I don't really like the vests. They hinder airtime, whip, any sort of force you can get on a coaster, really. So I'm definitely glad it has the OG restraints. You're going to start up that lift hill, and then you're going to go through this little pre-drop section, and it's actually fairly forceful. Your legs actually go a bit numb here. Not completely. It's not like Alpengeist Cobra Roll or anything. There's nothing that insane on this ride, all right? It's not Alpengeist, but it definitely packs a bit of a punch. So then after that pre-lift, or pre-drop, I mean, you're going to head down the actual drop, and it's a pretty weak drop for a B&M invert. I know Raptors actually gives a surprise pop of airtime, and so does Banshees, but this one really doesn't do it for me. But then after this, you're going to go through a vertical loop. It's a pretty average loop for a B&M invert, but these are usually fun elements, so I'm fine with it. After this, you're going to charge through an Immelman. This is a fun part of the ride. Again, your feet go a little bit numb here, but the main point of this section is to kind of take you along the creek almost. It's definitely really good at doing that. You feel like your feet are going to scrape the creek. It's definitely a lot of fun. And exiting that Immelman is pretty snappy too. So you get a good jolt of laterals, I'd say. Then you're going to head through the best element on the ride, the 0G roll. These are always super fun on B&M inverts. I wouldn't say it's quite as snappy as Raptors, but it's definitely a really good element still. You kind of whip through the entire thing, getting great laterals throughout. And then after this, you're kind of going to meander a bit, and this is where Great Bear loses me a bit. I wish it had something in between the 0G roll and the corkscrew, maybe a second corkscrew right before the turn into the real corkscrew, but you kind of just meander along. It's cool if you're looking up at it, but it's kind of like, just get me to the corkscrew already. So you'll fly up against the woods and the paths and all that, and then you're going to go through the corkscrew. Now, this is the second best part of the ride, in my opinion. It's a very whippy corkscrew. Again, maybe not quite as good as Raptors, but definitely really good still. And then for the grand finale, you just kind of slowly meander back to the brakes. It's really disappointing because I wish they could have done like a double corkscrew here or something, even though they already got that on Fahrenheit. Because it kind of just sucks meandering back to the brakes knowing you lost a ton of speed. Or maybe you could have done a heartline roll here similar to Banshee. because that would have played into the fact that you don't really have a lot of speed here. So that would have been nice, but whatever. It was an older design, so I get why they didn't do that. But overall, I feel like this layout, it's definitely great. They made the best of what they had, I guess, but also not really because, again, I think I could have had a couple solutions for the dead spots that were there, but again, for the time, maybe they didn't think of that, so it's okay. For the smoothness, I think it's pretty much butter smooth. I didn't really feel any rattle or anything. I'm really resistant to pain though on roller coasters. Like I think Skyrush's trains are the second best of any roller coaster, and I like rides like Predator and Twister. So just note that maybe there's a rattle and I just didn't catch it because I don't really feel those things, but who knows. So for Great Bear's final score out of 1,000, I'm gonna give it a 795. This is definitely a bit of a weaker B&M invert, but definitely not too weak. It's not like a Batman the Ride clone or Silver Bullet for sure, but it's definitely not up there with like Raptor, Alpengeist, Montu. So that being said, I do like B&M inverts a lot more than some people, so that's why it still gets a 795 for me, being a lower tier invert. It's got some really intense moments still. Just, I don't know, clean up those dead spaces and it would be a really good invert. Probably top 3 for sure. I think it's my number 6 at the park. Number 5 for any normal person who doesn't have Comet as high as I do. But anyways, that's my review of Great Bear at Hershey Park. Let me know what you guys think of this thing down in the comments below. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.